Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Thank you very much for coming. Sunday class, and also welcome those whoever might be joining via Mayapur TV. And yes, I would request those who have the technical facilities to check whether someone puts a question or a comment within the chat. So, of course, the online audience is welcome to put their questions or comments accordingly. I chose today the topic of Shrishti Lila, one of my favorite topics, which is translated as much as the pastime of creation. Shrishti is the creative process or the creation, and it's a pastime that actually extends over at least 2 cantos, particularly the 2nd and 3rd canto, but also later cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's a lot about this pastime of the Lord. The Brahma Samhita is also starting with the first at least 25 shlokas, dealing with the spiritual and material creations before Lord Brahma is revealing his beautiful Brahma Samhita, the hymns of the creator, God Brahma. So there are many scriptures dealing with this topic, and Srila Prabhupada also highlights in many places, particularly also in the 2nd canto, the relevance of this topic for those who practice Krishna consciousness. But besides, even if it's someone who does not practice Krishna consciousness, it's still actually the topic through which someone can enter more easily into the whole topic of God consciousness. Since in general, when we speak of God, probably many people, particularly in the Christianity influenced world, will think of the Creator, the one. God is the one who created the world. So, but also there's a hierarchy in Leelas or pastimes of the Lord within the Vaishnava philosophy, where the Shrishti Lila is rather at the beginning. But the hierarchy is actually only applicable based on the qualification of the spiritualist to appreciate different pastimes of the Lord. On the spiritual platform, it is said they are all practically one. There is no lesser or better pastime of the Lord. For all his pastimes are practically fully transcendental and full of spiritual potency. And Srila Prabhupada is making the point in one of the purports of the 2nd canto, I think the 3rd, 4th, and 5th chapter, where he says that the pure devotee relishes the philosophical discourses based on might be Sankhya philosophy. The 3rd canto deals with the creation, or the Vishnu Tattva, the Purusha avatars. He appreciates and relishes these things as much as being kissed by Krishna in the rasa dance. So first, when you might read that, it's kind of a striking comparison. And Srila Prabhupada highlights, so because there's qualitatively, in a sense, no difference. But he says the important difference is the conditioned soul, who is influenced and affected by material energy, cannot properly appreciate these confidential pastimes of Krishna. For example, the rasa dance, but he even starts further, even in general, the pastimes in Vrindavan. So therefore, it is important that the soul gets the appropriate, so to say, lila, which is based on the condition of the jiva. When he compares, also he gives a comparison with the doctor who describes the proper medicine, and he says someone who is still influenced by the material energy, he says must hear about the pastimes of the Purusha avatars, because that's the proper and most relevant information for the conditioned soul, since we are within the material energy. So therefore this pastime of creation is extremely relevant. Some maybe unfortunately might be on the platform of relishing also the pastimes or like the forms of Krishna in the spiritual world, but at the same time, as I see also for myself, for me, Krishna becomes closer or more tangible if I think of him in context of the creation and how he performs the pastimes of creation, how he expands into Vishnu, because then for me it's more relevant also in my daily life, because I can make points of reference. What happens in this body, how does the world function, what is my role here, how is Krishna related to it. So this is something that is part of my daily life and therefore easier to connect. So of course at some point the practitioner is required to advance so that he can appreciate, or he or she can appreciate the pastimes which are outside the Shrishti Lilas, so might it be in Ayodhya, in Madhava, Gurukunda. So therefore I would like to speak today on this topic. It's since a few years a topic that I contemplate upon, where I do some research, and where also some South Indian tours were very inspiring and helpful to absorb deeper in this. And I would like to share with you also some of the understandings I gathered, some informations I find very fascinating and relevant, so that hopefully in general inspiration is created to absorb yourself within these features of the Lord. The Purusha avatars means practically the Vishnu Tattva. These are the forms of Krishna that particularly deal with the material creation. Or the processes, or like the pastimes with the demigods, they go into this category, like Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva. This all happens within the material creation where Vishnu is involved. So there we can also hear some interesting details. You may have known, you may have not known, so I hope I can stimulate your interest, particularly in that aspect of Krishna and Krishna's pastimes. Let's begin with the question of faith, because in general, even if you put this topic to an audience that might not be already inclined or like having faith in any religious concept, whether it be Krishna consciousness or Christianity or Islam, the question is like, is this belief, is it fact, to talk about the Creator? And let's just shortly go there. We can always assert the affirmative or the non-affirmative. I can say God is there, Creator is there, and I can say He's not existing. Like the soul, the same topic, I can say the soul exists or doesn't exist. Or free will is also a similar philosophical topic, where it can hold basically two positions of either affirmative or non-affirmative, and the third position would be I don't know. There would be the agnostic, the person who says I cannot know, so therefore I don't take any position besides the third, that I can't know. In realization theory, in philosophy, Immanuel Kant brought a very relevant and actually really clear perspective on that. He examined not whether God is true or not, whether the soul is true or not. He rather examined based on the question, what can I know? He examined our capacity to realize these things or not realize these things. So he didn't focus on the object of question, God or the soul, whether this is true or not. He focused on what is our actual capacity to assert the either affirmative or non-affirmative. And I make it short, I just come to the conclusion, because otherwise it will eat up all the time for the kata. He says God cannot be proven or disproven, because as an object, or like as the soul of transcendental nature, it is not available for the mind and senses, like as any given material object that I can approach with logic and experience. So in one sense, so therefore I cannot, my capacities mentally and sensually are not sufficient to absolutely assert either the affirmative or non-affirmative option. So, but he says it cannot be proven, but it must be assumed. And let's give a short argument. Why is that so, or how can we understand that? Madhava realized that there are certain hierarchies of the realization process. First there are the senses that gather information, and our mind has categories in which he organizes these impressions so that we can speak, for example, of quality and quantity and causality, cause and effect. So these things are there, and then there's above another, the intelligence, you might say, transcendental, in German we say transzendentale Schemata, transcendental schemes, I don't know if it's the proper correction. This is part of our mind or intelligence that tells the mind when to choose which category. So practically one level is underlying the other to make it function. One is practically existing within. And similarly, he says there are two absolute features in the material world, which are the basis of all realization. This is space and time. It means you cannot think of something without already, he used the word a priori, to upfront already assume there is time and space. You cannot think it away, so therefore it's absolute. When I speak of something, I already have to have a space in which this happens. I also have to have already a time of past, present, future, so that I can anyways tell of a given activity. So you cannot not think of any time and space. So that's a precondition that must be there. So this gives the basis for any relative experience. So the absolute truth of nature is the basis for the relative truth which can then be experienced. So even if we might not know the absolute truth, we must assume that there is some. Alright? I hope so far it makes sense a bit, so that, because it kind of gives our perceptions or opinions, it rounds it up, it makes it whole, so to speak. Alright, so therefore this topic requires some openness, some faith that there is a possibility for the Creator, and the Shastras also emphasize that one should approach this with some openness and faith. Srila Prabhupada also says in the Bhagavad Gita, even if you don't believe in Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, at least assume hypothetically that he is, and with this understanding, study the Bhagavad Gita, and then you can enter. It's like a psychological phenomenon. If I make a space in my mind, I can fill it. If I don't have a space for something, it cannot be present. So practically the openness is like a prerequisite to get closer to the understanding of Krishna. I mentioned before the Brahma Samhita as a very relevant book in regards to the creational pastimes, and this book starts with first of all establishing Krishna or Govinda as the Supreme Person, Ishvara Parama Krishna, Sachitananda Vigraha Anadiradi Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam, that the Supreme Lord is Govinda. He is a body of eternity, knowledge and bliss, which is interesting if you think of it as a substance, but we just say his body constitutes of these elements, let's call it energies. And he has no cause besides himself, no superior cause, and he is the cause of everything else that exists. And then the Brahma Samhita continues to give us a picture of the spiritual world. It gives us practically a mental image, I would say, though it's some might take it as symbolic. It's a lotus flower. So it says there's a big lotus flower which has many leaves, and this represents the many planets in the spiritual sky, and also the residence of the gopis, for example. And in the core, in the center of this lotus, there Krishna, Radha, and Krishna are residing. That's Goloka Vrindavan, like a very luminous, blissful, ecstatic lotus, which is surrounded by a square region which is called Shvetadvip. So Krishna, Bhagavan, is situated in this lotus area, and it says he is the Supreme Person, and he has no cause besides himself, so he doesn't depend on anyone. That's the meaning of Swayam Bhagavan. And then what he does is, he expands himself in different forms for different purposes. And in the Shvetadvip region surrounding this lotus, they are also what we know as the first quadruple expansion. So Krishna expands as Balaram, and then he expands from there as the first quadruple form, the Vishnus, Vasudev, Shankarshan, Pradyumna, Aniruddha. And then the Shankarshan from this first 4 Vishnu forms becomes Narayan. Then there's a second, quadruple expansion, the same, Vasudev, Shankarshan, Pradyumna, Aniruddha. And the Shankarshan from there becomes the person that we know as Mahavishnu. So, and Krishna is also said he has different, a certain amount of qualities that are complete only within himself, 64 qualities. Primary among them is his beauty. He says that beauty is actually one of the core characteristics of Krishna. Also loveliness, because he's considered the supreme Kamadev. Also, his essential feature is loving exchange, particular conjugal loving exchange. That's very central to the identity of Krishna. Whereas other forms of Krishna have a different, let's say, identity or central features, as we will hear today. Of course, although this reflects in each Krishna form, might it be Radha, Krishna, Lakshmi, Narayan, Sita, Ram, there's always this, joyous and loving exchange with this inner energy in form of either Sita, Lakshmi, or Radharani. And the forms differ in their potency. There are some forms that don't, they're called Prakash. Krishna simply expands identically into 16,107 forms, because he is already the 108 form. And there's no difference. They're exactly replicas which can act completely independent from each other. In each palace, this is manifested in Dwaraka. When each queen has his own Krishna, practically in 16,108 palaces. And Narada Muni is very astonished to witness that, seeing doing Krishna different stuff at the same time with different queens. He said once he's doing his morning rituals, another time he's conversing with the queen, another time doing something, whatever. So then he has other forms he called Tat Ikat Marupa forms. The English term often is plenary portions, like partial expansions. And they differ slightly in their appearance. Like for example, Narayan or Vishnu has 4 arms, a different blue. Krishna is Shyama Sundar, he's like darkish blue. And Vishnu is more sky blue, it is said. And he has 4 arms. And he also is differently equipped with features. He says 4 qualities are not in him that are only in Krishna. This includes his flute play, for example. This includes his most sweet pastimes and the prema that is present within the devotees of Krishna. Not at least the beauty. He cannot match Krishna in beauty. So Lakshmi might be attracted to Krishna, but Radharani is never attracted to Lord Narayan, for example. So there's not, the potency is different, and the qualities are different. And there's a different categorization of Samsha and no, I forgot. At least 2. This also matters. This comes in this term. However, these are particular forms of particular pastimes where manifest particular abilities, like the Darsavatars. We recently heard about Lord Narasimhadev. You hear about Matsya, Kurmadev, and so on. So actually, these features, these Tatikat Marupa forms, those are particularly relevant for the Shrishti Lila, the creation of pastimes. Krishna himself is not doing it. He's actually employing his forms of Narayan, of Vishnu, within this pastime. Also the super soul, as we know it, is a Vishnu form, Vishnu Tattva we say. By Vishnu Tattva, it means the identity of that form is related to the Vishnu activities. And Vishnu, as a word, means someone who permeates everything and who nourishes everything, maintains everything. So we know that Vishnu is the one who deals with the material energy. It's not Krishna himself. So when we speak of Shrishti Lila, we speak of a pastime performed by Lord Vishnu, who is of course not different from Krishna. At the same time, he is. That's always our philosophy, and he's at the same time different. Another category of Vishnu's or Krishna's form is mentioned as Avesha Rupa. These are the jivas that can be particularly empowered, like Lord Brahma, who also matters in the creation. Lord Shiva, we recently heard, is a different category, a different tattva, who can himself even produce Avesha avatars. He can empower jivas, like also Brahma. So that also regular living entities can even perform pastimes that seem to be only possible by Vishnu. Like Ananta Shesha, it is said, he can empower a jiva to carry practically in this form of Ananta Shesha the universes on their heads, for example. Or like Rudra, like the Shiva forms can empower jivas to take care of the material devastation. So we have then, yes, the Vishnu forms, and we heard before, Shankarshan is the one who expands into the Mahavishnu. And there are 3 Vishnu forms, and here we can also have a connection to our daily meditation, that a name of Krishna always indicates a pastime actually, or like his activity. The name is actually given based on what Krishna does. Sometimes Srila Prabhupada also says Krishna actually has no name. His names are according to the pastimes he performs. So, but so this is always the connection. And the Mahavishnu, his actual full name is Karanadakashriya Vishnu. And this refers to that he is on a place which is called the Karana Ocean or Viraj River. That's an interesting sphere. It's at the material, or everything as creation, one should imagine as a circle. You know, a hypothetic, which has of course a hypothetic limit. You know, but this circle is split into 4 parts. 3 of these 4 parts are the spiritual creation, and 1 part is the material creation. So, but since they're all endless, one should assume this circle to expand endlessly. So then we have an approximate relation of material and spiritual spheres. And it said there is some line between material and material spheres, and this is considered a river, a spiritual river, which is the Viraj or Vairaj, which is in German you have this word jenseits, the river of that is beyond. You know. So this line is the actual residence of Karanadakashriya Vishnu, where he lays also Ananta Shesh. And in the Krishna book we find that Krishna and Arjuna once visited this Mahavishnu, and there's a description of this area, and maybe I can shortly find it for you, because in this text I have a lot. Yeah, so I will translate it from the German text because I got it by now in German. So Krishna and Arjuna went to a huge, vast spiritual ocean, and this spiritual ocean was the Karananarnava ocean or Vairaj, which means that this ocean is the origin actually of the material world. So from there things emanate. And it said in the Mrityunjaya Tantra, a Vedic scripture, there is a more elaborate description of the Karana ocean or Vairaj. It is said there that the highest planetary systems in the material world, Satyaloka or Brahmaloka, is still far away from Rudraloka and Mahavishnu Loka. Rudraloka is interesting. It's also some half in the spiritual world, half in the material world. As we can see on this, there's this big poster we have of the material and spiritual world, I forgot the name. About Mahavishnu Loka, it is said in the Brahma Samhita that Mahavishnu is laying there, and then when he breathes, he's bringing out unlimited universes. And when he inhales again, all these universes enter into him. So this way, he actually causes the material creation. And then Krishna and Arjuna went into this water, and there seemed to be a very heavy storm of transcendental radiation. The whole air was still permeated by transcendental radiation. And the water of the Karana ocean was very much agitated. So it said, by the mercy of Krishna, Arjuna thus had the unique opportunity to witness this glorious Karana ocean. Then they also came to Mahavishnu, visited him in his palace. There's a whole description how with wonderful long arms formed he's laying there on Anantashesha, and so on. So this Mahavishnu is the personality that causes the material energy. It is described that actually the whole spiritual sky is Brahman, like radiant light, and then the material world is compared to a cloud that covers that sky. And it said Mahavishnu, by his influence, he transforms some of that Brahman into what we call Mahatattva. So he employs obviously quite some energy so that this material energy can gradually manifest from a very subtle form into that what we call then Prakriti at the end. So he is doing that, and he also is the one, by his own glance, he manifests Kala Shakti, or like brings Kala Shakti into the material energy, because the material energy is said to be passive, nothing happens by herself. But while Vishnu is agitating her with his own glance, which is one item, so to speak, Kala Shakti is one item, and then there's Rama Devi, his inner potency, they're all involved, and most probably there are many more energies, just not mentioned. And so all of these continuously influence this material energy to gradually manifest into that what we call Prakriti. First it is a so-called Pradhan, which is unmanifest, and gradually, it is said, first the elements lay loose, and then there's the combination process, like some tensing, which goes a bit along with this modern, is it no physics, or like the theory that like of the Big Bang, that things really got, how to say, were forced together, and before it was loose. So it is also described there that Krishna's energy actually starts to bring material elements together and make them manifest. So that's the work of Karunadakasha Vishnu. And it's said also that the universes, they come out of his skin pores, which gives us a bit of an idea of the dimension we should think of. He's called Mahavishnu for a reason. He's actually immensely huge, because if you consider a universe with millions and millions of miles as a measurement, how big they are, and that one of them fits in the skin pore of Mahavishnu, then you can imagine how big is their form. It cannot even be perceived by any living entity. So they have the shape of little golden eggs, it said, and when they come out and they enter into this Mahatattva, this Mahatattva functions like a fertilizer. It's a bit like the egg comes in and gets also surrounded by the 5 Mahabhutas, these big elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and then they nurture this universe to grow gradually. So Krishna as a supreme gardener is doing it, and we can see also the principle of like an egg developing. This is also in general the symbol of fertility within the material world. Out of an egg, gradually, a living form is coming. And he said when the egg is manifested, then he enters each of these eggs as Garbhodakasha Vishnu. And Garbho means birth, and Garbhodaka is the ocean of birth. This is for one, since also Lord Brahma was manifested there. He's, I forgot his name, Swayambhu. He's actually without birth. He's taken birth from the lotus stem of Garbhodakasha Vishnu, who grows it out of his own navel. And he does something else. Out of his skin pores, he manifests the garbal waters. So it said the universes get filled half with transcendental water, which is the perspiration of the Supreme Lord. So he fills it with his own water, completely self-sufficient. So he lays down there as Gaudakasha Vishnu, who is in close relationship with Lord Brahma actually. First, Lord Brahma doesn't know, he first has to figure it out. He's born in ignorance, like we all are. But then he is more, he's the actually, how you say it again, when you have the Botschafter, how you say?
Ambassador?
Yeah, it's kind of the ambassador also between Vishnu and the demigods. Like whenever there's something they can't handle in Brahma himself, he's the person who is connecting with Vishnu. And they said also when Brahma is sleeping, because he is a body of pure intelligence, and actually is not so much affected by physical needs. Still there's some type of sleep he undergoes too in time of devastation. But it said he's not unconscious then. I guess we become perhaps very unconscious. We kind of sleep, dreamless sleep, or being completely just knocked off and, yeah. But Brahma is in a state where he then converses with Lord Vishnu. It said about the matters of creation. They discuss, because I guess there's a lot of discuss if you think of the whole creation. So they are in exchange very closely. And then Gaudakasha Vishnu is also this Vishnu form who makes another step to become Kshirodakasha Vishnu, which is said he becomes the super soul of each living entity. So he manifests in everyone's heart, and he becomes the companion for us. Said Upadrashtanamatacha Bharta Bhakta Maheshwara Paramatmeti Chapyakto Deis Middle Purusha Paraham. Upadrashtan Anumanta means the overseer and permitter. He's the person who has, so to say, he manages what happens a bit from a distance, so to speak, because he's the permitter, he's the witness. He fulfills the desires of every living entity. So actually, Krishna acts in relationship to us through his agent as a super soul to fulfill all our material desires. The bodies we have are manifested by the super soul. The abilities come with it, granted by the super soul. So everything is actually given by Vishnu in the name of Krishna. Krishna is controlling Vishnu. And Kshirapta Shai Vishnu, the Kshirapta is the milk ocean. So he has an interesting residence within the material world which is not visible. So actually Kshirapta Shai Vishnu means the form of Vishnu that lays on the ocean of milk. And it said it's a transcendental ocean. And particularly also Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur uses Padam in some explanation which clearly points out this is a transcendental place not visible for the material eyes. Here he says, Patam Kshiro Dadhi Sta Sveta Dipam Tamasa Prakate Param. The island known as Shvetadvip is laying in the milk ocean. So yeah, he has an island there also called Shvetadvip and is transcendental. She has nothing, or it has nothing to do with the material world. And Srila Prabhupada puts the example that a government, for example of the city, might own a holiday house, which is particularly reserved for the mayor and important government officials. Such a house is not an ordinary house. It says in a similar way, Shvetadvip, which is laying in the milk ocean, is param or transcendental, although it might be the material world. So it has a different status, and it's not approachable. You cannot approach this place, as you cannot just approach some government building just like that. And in the pastime of the journey of the milk ocean, which is in the 8th canto, it's a very interesting pastime. It is also described that this milk ocean, of course, it's not milk as we know it. It doesn't get sour or is in any way, how to say, attached to some materialistic, material qualities. No, it's a transcendental milk ocean, which also produces, instead of there's on the shore there's no sand. Actually, it's what I said, that transcendental gems, diamonds, rubies, everything is extremely sublime. And then Vishnu, when he's there, he's extremely radiant. It's also said when the demigods come there in Brahma, they can hardly see him. He's so radiant, such a strong, powerful light that it's like the senses, so to say, of the demigods have to adjust gradually to see him. He's very beautifully smiling, beautifully decorated, and Lakshmi Devi is there, serving his lotus feet and massaging them. And Brahma himself, first of all, did not know where Shvetadvip. He had some inner sense, let's call it an inner compass, and he went to some place, but they couldn't see Shvetadvip because it's transcendental. And then it said they offered prayers, and then when Vishnu was satisfied with the prayers of Brahma, he revealed Shvetadvip in the material world to them. And then they could see, and then they could exchange with the Lord. And then, since the situation in this leader was that the demons managed to diminish the demigods severely, many demigods were practically slain, they lost their lives, and it was about reviving them back, or find a solution, because the demons tended to overpower the demigods. So then Vishnu suggested like some sacrifice that became very attractive to the demons, because there was a promise of nectar, amrit. You can become immortal. So of course, the demons were very much interested in that. And then the whole pastime gradually happened. And you can see that this pastime also, look at how it was being done, churning an ocean, of course, what do you need for that? So they took Mandara mountain, which is a huge mountain, and one of the king of the snakes is Vasuki. It's a huge, enormous snake, and they used the snake to put it around Mandara mountain, and the idea was like by pulling it back and forth to make the mountain clear, how you say this in English?
Churn.
The churn. And the demigods, so said, they had the tail, and the demons had the heads, and there was a bit of a struggle because the heads of Vasuki was a powerful snake. He was also producing heat and smoke, so they had to deal with that. They weren't so happy. So gradually in this pastime, it is interesting that first the milk ocean produced poison. Although it's a transcendental ocean, but some more produced poison first, which was being absorbed by Lord Shiva, therefore it's called the blue-throated, because he could absorb all the poison. And this is sometimes compared also the trend to spiritual life. If you start our spiritual life and start to make it move, it churns up also material conditions in our nartas and limitations, which make it with poison. It's also said about Gita that the pleasure in Sattva-guna is first like poison, at the end like nectar. So this might reflect in this pastime. At first there comes the poison, at the end Dhanvantari, actually, if I'm correct, delivers the nectar. Right? Do you remember? Dhanvantari is coming, I think he comes with the nectar because he's the demigod, so to say, of not health. He brings the medical science. So, in this way, Vishnu is present within the material world and performs various functions. For the demigods, he is a somewhat supervisor, or someone who also interferes if things get too troublesome. Then he also kills demons, he is visible to them. For living entities like us who are not partaking directly in his pastimes, he is present as a super soul, and he says he manifests also in features like knowledge. He said, Savasya chaham mridisanvistu matas mritya gyanam apuhanam cha vidashya savir aham evavetu dantavrit vedavit eva chaham. He says, I reside in the heart of everyone, and from me knowledge, remembrance and forgetfulness comes. So here also it's an interesting or an important detail that Krishna is reciprocating with the desire of the jiva, because Srila Prabhupada explains that forgetfulness and knowledge does not only refer to that we in our daily life can remember something or don't forget another, In a broader context, he says, those who want to remember Krishna, Krishna facilitates also memory that uplifts our Krishna consciousness gradually, and those who want to forget Krishna, he also facilitates the forgetfulness. So he's there as a neutral friend, so to speak, observer. And therefore also the relationship with Vishnu can naturally not be, in that sense, such a sweet one as with Krishna, because Vishnu has a different role. He has to be somewhat neutral and a bit also of a fair judge, someone who gives the results of karma, and someone who is also not just creating, but is also destroying the worlds. So often Vishnu, of course, we hear he's the maintaining principle, sattva, and Shiva is the destructive principle. So at the same time though, it is said Kala Shakti, this energy of time, is a feature of the Super Soul. And that what is described in the Bhagavad Gita in the 11th chapter, when Arjuna sees this universal form, it's actually Mahavishnu and then this feature of Kala Shakti. Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur is explaining that Vishnu is thinking, let me first show Arjuna my feature as Mahavishnu. And there's a description, many helmets, many arms are everywhere. And then later when this is done, the exact verses I could also pick again and go through it. And then later on, the destructive feature of Kala Shakti is described when he sees the fiery mouth where the soldiers enter and they get grinded and everything. Because that's also a feature of the Super Soul. That's the other. On one side he's maintaining, on the other side he's devouring, and he says exactly that also in the 13th chapter where he's describing, although the Super Soul is the developer of all, he also devours them all. So both, and he empowers Lord Shiva particularly, of course, to destroy the material worlds. But actually it's the Super Soul who is initiating the whole process. And the others are agents, I would say, in this process. So we can see that from these few details, that this form of Vishnu obviously is very relevant for our daily experience of creation, destruction, memory, forgetfulness, desire fulfilling, desire developing, and that actually he's, in that sense, closer to us. The proximity between the Jiva and Vishnu is, so to speak, if you think in terms of time and space, we must. The proximity is lesser than to Krishna. If you think of it in terms of distance to the spiritual world, Goloka is far away. Of course, it's a linear understanding. Of course, the cosmos and material energy it's underlying, it's already in there. It's not, so to speak, as we go from here to Bern, we know it's so many kilometers. It's not a linear distance. Of course, it's a state of consciousness to some degree. At the same time, the point is, like, in this consciousness where we are at, we seem to be more related to the Vishnu form, simply pragmatically speaking, than to Krishna. Of course, if a person is very dedicating itself to the worship of Krishna and meditates on Krishna, of course Krishna is closer to this person's heart. You know? But let's get back to why the Purusha avatars and the Shrishti Lila is so much recommended for conditioned souls, because this pastime gives them a better understanding of the position of the Lord and the position of the Jiva, and then the Jiva can better relate in its original constitutional position as inferior part to the superior Lord, and understand who is the creator, who is the maintainer, and the actual enjoyer. So to distinguish the Jiva from the Paramatma and also material energy. And these are three features discussed in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita in detail. Yes, so I think I shared quite a few things. Of course, there's a whole, in fact, writing a book on it. But there's so many stuff to say. You mentioned the Long Brahma Samhita, Srimad Bhagavatam. There's so many books. From your side so far, do you have any comments or questions or sharings related to the creation of pastimes? And yes, please, check whether the online audience something.
It's not so directly related to the Shrishti, but
you were talking about this fact that Krishna is equal, but actually it's Vishnu, it's Paramatma basically that is equal, right, with Krishna. So it's kind of hard to understand, because I was just reading now in the 7th canto in the beginning, where there's the story of Yudhishthira asking Narada that how is it that the demons they get the same.
Yeah, Shishupal got the
Shishupal got the liberation.
Whereas great yogis have to endeavor so much.
And then there's the story of Chai and Vichai and this kind. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit? Yeah, how to understand this? Like you said already, is it to be understood like this, that there are different features of the Lord, and so the Paramatma, what is basically described that is always equal, is just Paramatma. And also in Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna says he is equal to everybody, that's basically Paramatma. And then
when he says, of course he speaks about himself, I mean equal, let's look at the terms. The discussion you mentioned where Narada Muni is speaking, he points out that being neutral means for the Lord that actually both either the prayers or the curses affect him. So he's neither particularly pleased or like influenced by prayers, which might sound like what?
Yeah.
Neither by curses. It doesn't touch him. So what he counts, what he filters is the attention or like connection that is made to him through that. So in this sense he's equal. He says, even if a demon insults me, in a sense it is for him the same as if a demigod prays to him. Because actually duality, we must understand, as material phenomena is actually illusion. There are no demons and there are no demigods in a higher spiritual sense. These are temporary roles we adopt. So, and in these roles we can have certain capacity to approach Krishna or Vishnu. So, and externally, of course, one is inimical, the other is devoted. The demigod is a appointed servant of the Lord, and he wants to please Krishna and cooperate, and then the demon wants him to kill the Lord. Based on the, let's say, the premise that actually all of this is illusion, there is no demigod, one is not, demon one is not, what is existing is Vishnu and the Jiva, that then also the demon, in his way of giving attention to Krishna in an inimical way, is essentially doing the same as the demigod. The Jiva is connecting with Vishnu in a different way. Of course, our philosophy highlights Anukulina Krishna Nushina and Bhakti Uttama, that devotional service should be favorable, and we should not try to go now, like, since it doesn't matter, apparently, like, hate Krishna and like insult him, and then anyway we think of Krishna. But he makes a point that therefore there's no unfairness going on, since he reciprocated fairly with that. And then he speaks also about that even those in anger, he makes even the point their devotion is even more intense. He says, I wonder how is that, because like the examples like Kamsa are mentioned, who day and night was so absorbed in fear and anger, like Shishupal was probably very envious. So they were completely absorbed. And then he mentions King Vena, on the other hand, who was not even inimical. He just didn't bother at all. He just didn't think of Krishna at all. And he says, therefore, he goes to hell. So this is points to recently I was asking, I was thinking of, sometimes what does it mean, the demons and demigods? Demons apparently can also see Vishnu, and they can exchange. How come? If being demon means you actually have no vision to Lord, or to speak of faith, obviously they have faith, because how can you be inimical towards someone and work against someone that you believe does not exist? So you must have some type of faith, but like it's twisted into that you become an enemy of the person, which has a connection, for example, to the Christian theology, where I said Lucifer originally was an angel who, behaved, or like broke the law, so to speak, and was thrown down to earth, and he remembered the Lord. It's not that these demons, the archangels, came with him. It's not that they or became atheists and say God does not exist. No, they know, but they consciously work against him. And one scheme they apply is to make others believe he isn't even existing. Kind of out of revenge, you know? Let's keep them away from the Lord. Think about it, it's quite interesting. We must actually categorize the demons in their what is truly an atheist, what is an ignorant person, what is an inimical, how to call it, demon who actually has God consciousness but wants to overpower God. So we have to actually sometimes look at the terms we're using to relativize the new. And yeah, regarding being neutral, this is just what I recall from the argument of Narada Muni, that actually Vishnu is not particularly influenced by neither prayers, no curses. So their he reciprocates only with the effort that is made to connect to him. And then, yeah, it makes sense actually. We always think from the perspective of duality, what is now wanted, what is unwanted, in terms of how to behave proper toward God, how to behave sinful. And that of course matters still, but on the higher transcendent platform, these things are irrelevant somehow. Alright. Okay, if there are no further comments, also in the chat, there's nothing done.
I didn't check now, I don't have my phone.
Okay, now book has come. Anyway, what to do? In case there was something, I apologize. I couldn't answer.
Problem.
Then, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai,
Jai.
Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
Keshava ki jai.